Hello, and welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 71, Imitators. Imitators are something that we have kind of talked about. We've talked about the copyist, the specialist, the plagiarist, and the imitator. And basically, when we had our preview on Wednesday, a kind of interesting theme kind of emerged. That's kind of the beauty of these things. I mean, I'm Bruce. I'm here with my partner and wife, Julie Rauer. We talk about things in terms of our kind of particular ruminations about things in our work and related to that, and our kind of interdisciplinary work with um, Art Science Complex. And it was interesting because what I love about this. I mean, I can't speak for Julie, but what I love about this is the fact that we will find in the course of the investigation itself. What I mean that is like sometimes what'll happen is I'll come across this by the conversation. When I was a young professor and a lecturer, I enjoyed talking through my ideas. I never really thought about the fact that I had an obligation or responsibility to kind of deliver any kind of like particular information, more than I just felt that the platform of lecturing gave me the opportunity to kind of like ruminate with my ideas. This is kind of the same thing. That's why I kind of like the form. So anyway, as a result of that, that's kind of came across this. So uh, as a result, I get the opportunity to kind of be fortunate enough to read through two of my favorite books. The first one being, which we've seen before, Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance, one of my favorites. And the other one, which is maybe my favorite book in the whole world. Well, maybe, I don't know if favorite is the right word. What I believe is the most important book ever written, The Origin of Species by Darwin. All right, so we're going to read the two of them because they're kind of related to a similar theme. So first, let me kind of talk about this. The civilized man, IP, the civilized man has built a coach, but has lost the use of his feet. He is supported on crutches, but lacks on such support of muscle. He has a fine Geneva watch, but he fails the skill to tell the hour of the sun. A Greenwich nautical almanac he has, and so being sure of the information when he wants it. The man in the street does not know a stat in the sky. The solstice he does not observe. The equinox he knows as little. And the whole bright calendar of the year is without a dial in his mind. His notebooks impart his memory. His notebooks impair his memory. His libraries overlook his wit. The insurance office increases the number of accidents, and it may be a question whether machinery does not encumber, whether we have not lost by refinement some energy by the Christian enshrined in establishments and forms some vigor of wild virtue. For every, and that's a great one, by a Christianity endowed in establishment and forms some vigor of wild virtue. For every Stoic was a Stoic, but in Christendom, where is the Christian? A lot of times people ask me about drawing, and I say, drawing is the easy part, seeing is hard. And I think what happens is it's kind of similar in the fact that if we create these mechanical devices, and I think one of the things that I see now, especially with the use of AI, is that just like with the camera, we lose that ability to see. And if we remember back a few weeks ago when we were talking about the great century of genius in the 17th century, Whitehead was referring to the fact that the great observance of natural art in the kind of manifestation of Leonardo was that which allowed us to see. And I think in that regard, I see the fact that many people will advance technique, but they won't advance insight. And the insight is because they're not trying to learn to see, they're basically just trying to render, and which is kind of one of the things we'll talk about with technique. But now to take from this piece in Darwin, which is like super cool. So Here we go. All right, here was it. All right. I had it. Okay. One variation under domestication. Ah, I love this. Many laws regulate variation, some few of which can be dimly seen and will hereafter be briefly discussed. I will here only allude to what may be called correlated variation. Important changes in the embryo or larva will probably entail changes in the mature animal. This, now here it comes. In monstrosities, a word that was used, right? The correlation between quite distinct parts are very curious, and many instances are given in Isidore Geoffroy St. Hilaire's great work on the subject. Breeders believe that long limbs are almost always accompanied by an elongated head. Some instances of correlation are quite whimsical. Thus, cats, which are entirely white and have blue eyes, are generally deaf, but it has been lately stated by Mr. Tate that this is confined to the males. Color and constitutional peculiarities go together, of which many remarkable cases could be given amongst animals and plants. From facts collected by Heusinger, it appears that white sheep and pigs are injured by certain plants, whilst dark-colored individuals escape. Professor Wyman has recently communicated to me a good illustration of this fact. On asking some farmers in Virginia how it was that all their pigs were black, they informed him that the pigs that ate the paint root, which colored their bones pink and which caused the hoofs to become dislodged, but the varieties to drop off, and let me say this as kind of culturally progressive as possible, but the black varieties to drop off, and one of the crackers, right, Virginia, it says Virginia squatters, added, we select the black members of a litter for raising as they alone have a good chance of living. Now, why all this verbiage? Why all this nonsense? Because, right, I'm a nonsensical individual. No. Yeah. Because, thank you, P. Thank you, P. So anyway, the reason is because we're going to talk about imitation and the imitator. Now, the imitator is something that exists, and most of us understand that in the natural society, the artificial society, which we would call the breeding aspect or artificial selection. And at the same time, imitation or imitators exist very successfully in the natural world. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that as relationship to technique and aesthetics. But before that, we were going to talk about what is the most important part and the most amazing thing. Yes, we are. Here she comes. Here I come. Okay, what's new in Julie? Now, one of the things we've been able to do is be able to kind of show a header. So, yes, and if you look at the, away I forgot. No, there you go. So as a result, what happens is we now can kind of print something as a kind of header for our talks. And what we did is we kind of we put that piece that Julie's working on in this week in Julie. Yes. So, sorry, I kind of spazzed. So okay. So one of the questions we're going to try to find out is what is our essential nature? And what are those things that could exist that aren't plastic? I think that everything in terms of our existence is plastic because I believe in a process related kind of I think you're plastic. Oh, you're legless. You're legless. Okay. So anyway, some great news. We have 225 subscribers as of tonight. Yes, but more important, we have our friends at Tease Tea. Thank you, Tease Tea. We love Tease Tea. Well, we've been, it's interesting. We've been drinking Tease Tea, and we kind of like for years, yeah. And like we basically became something that we started kind of drinking here on our little program. Yes, and I mean, what happened was
we stay up late and create.
Exactly. So what happened was Julie actually had a really great conversation this week, and we now have our friends. We're kind of following them; they're following us, and we kind of have our
at Tease Tea.
Yeah. So thank you, Tease Tea.
A delightful and healthy organic beverage, naturally sugar-free.
Yes.
And high in antioxidants.
Yes. I think it's like it kind of also creates genius. Like we were geniuses before, but we're even greater geniuses now thanks to Tease Tea. Okay, so anyway, so
and you
tell
have
us,
the last 2 pieces of chocolate.
Thank you, P. So tell us what you're going to talk about. But first, let's talk about what's new in Julie.
Okay. Well, I didn't have a huge amount of time, but I did get a running start on my new drawing. I'll wait till Bruce eats his chocolate. That is all yours because I ate the rest of it. It's very yummy. It has little crunchy almonds in it and sea salt. Nice, right? And it's very, very dark, which is very, very good for you. Anyway, what I am doing is I am drawing musical meditations on the use of bamboo in Edo period Japanese art and Japanese musical instruments. So the classic Japanese writing box, which was not just in the Edo period, it was also in the Momoyama period, the Muromachi period, the elegant, sprinkled with gold makie, wonderful, has an ink stone all built in and an inkwell. Do you have chocolate-free hands? Okay. So can you hold this up or your hand's chocolatey? You sure? Okay. So this is my drawing. There's a bit of glare. You might have to go in close. There's a lot of not just graphite on this, that there is also a lot of Derwent metallic pencil as well. What you are looking at is an extreme perspectival drawing that I just started of an Edo period Japanese writing box that is not only in the shape of a bamboo, but every single element is taken from the bamboo plant in the design of this beautiful, elegant, classic box. What I have done is the ink stone, which is in every writing box, used with, for those of you who don't know, a dried ink cake, almost always in a stick, is rubbed with water in the stone, on the stone, and the ink that is made when the dried ink cake is rehydrated pools in the lower part of the stone. It's a wonderful thing. There's a brush rest and a water jar all built in.
Sorry.
Okay, and what is rising, what is actually leaping out of my inkstone, I have put in a surreal way, because I am a surrealist at heart, a Japanese musical instrument, always made of bamboo, mixed with metal and lacquer elements. But as you can see, the winds, which have holes in them, much like a flute, are made of bamboo, and it's called a sho, S-H-O. And this is from the Met, as is the writing box. The writing box is in the Japanese wing, but the sho is in the Hall of Musical Instruments, and is one of my favorite, as it is crawling with golden insects. It has a spider, a spider's web, a beetle, and what looks like a cockroach, but is probably a
cicada.
It doesn't look very cicada-like. It really looks more beetle-like things. I'm so tired. Anyway, so I treated the bowl of the sho. Every sho has a bowl, and it has a mouth part that comes out of the bowl where one blows, and one actually holds it like this. I actually have a photo, a number of my own reference photos of someone playing a sho, and it's a very awkward way to hold an instrument, but you really have to focus. I mean, it's not like you can rest it on part of your body. You're kind of in this really awkward body position. It has a beautiful otherworldly sound, and what I'm going to do is I actually have musical notations of classic show written music that I am going to work into the design of the writing box.
Show tunes.
That's a good one. That's very funny. Nice pun.
Well,
anyway,
what's
yes.
pun?
A pun. It's just
Anyway,
so silly.
So anyway.
Okay.
All right. So what's interesting is I kind of brought up something in our conversations today about the fact that, oh, sorry, Pete, is that like in certain cases, there are certain things where you take and borrow or understand or appreciate. And Julie and I were talking about this in relationship to Japanese culture, which is something we're both deeply admiring of.
Yes, we are.
And whereas I think Julie has a tendency to kind of like understand and appreciate that which is the aesthetic, and that entails the kind of way of life and the character and the nature of people and the things that they create. I feel that though the aesthetic doesn't feel as personal to me, I feel more in tune with the technique. And I think there's some technical things that I just find absolutely fascinating. And no, they're not necessarily related to the things that we do in the West. I've been able to kind of borrow them. And in fact, one of the things I found interesting was that one of the things I'm doing recently is my in-row towers are directly related. I have one, yeah, are directly related to the in-row. Now, again, here is an example of one of my in-row towers.
A brilliant model.
Thank you, Pete. Surely. Now, what it is kind of like what Julie and I were talking on the way home about, like what's the nature of models, and we talked about models a couple of weeks ago. But I think what happens is models can become valuable when they're live. And what I mean by that is a model that's live is something that actually has certain parameters that make it something that exists other than just simply diagrammatically. Now, the in-row is something that's hung off the belt and basically is a series of toggles that kind of hang down and kind of are self-supporting for different capsules that would basically allow them to kind of keep different necessary aspects with you on the road. Now, in that case,
drugs, herbs, tobacco, things like that.
Kind of similar to a necessaire in a way.
Yeah.
Now, what I've done is I've kind of created these compartments, but instead of kind of compartments, what I've done is in the case of the gravity that holds it, the pieces would be held because they'd be hanging and their weight would basically kind of like come against the bottom of toggles and hold them together. Now, my piece is post-tensioned, so it basically has a piece at the top, right, that has a kind of like valve that allows a one-way kind of valve to allow it to kind of create a tension. So what happens is kind of like a heart valve, and in fact, it's a one-way valve. So when I pull these, right, I'm actually taking the in-row and I'm using it to kind of confine the tension in order to create, instead of this piece is hanging, but the piece is basically being supported. So I'm simulating that hanging. So in a way, the in-row box was what allowed me to create this confinement and the series of models. Now, in this case, none of these pieces are held together. None of these pieces are mechanically fastened. They're all held by each other.
Which is rather amazing.
Yeah, which is not the way one builds models in architectural school.
Normally
So again, if I was just, like obviously I can't push these things and hold them upside down unless, of course, the tension of the strings hold these all together so they don't fall apart. So these pieces on the top basically are the pieces that kind of hold them together, and you can kind of see there, kind of right there.
Quite astonishing. Yeah, that's a nice view.
Yeah, but I'm trying
to. I like the foreshortening view.
There we go. Okay, so you see the top where the pieces come in, and you can actually see the joint. And you can, let me see if I can get a close up at that one. There you go. You can actually see it. You know, you can see the piece where it kind of like pulls itself, and then it kind of allows it. It won't allow it to pull itself back. Now, again, it's not to the point where I can actually calibrate these things, you know, like to a point of actual kind of like specifics. I mean, they're hand tightened, so I can pull the pieces. But in the game, you know, if it wasn't for my fascination with, you know, the Japanese techniques and the Japanese kind of, you know, assemblages, I probably wouldn't have been able to kind of create this tower analogy. Now, I kind of thought about this. It's kind of like the fact that, you know, very many times in architecture, we stack things. And we stack things for a lot of reasons. We may stack bricks, we may stack floors, we may stack, buildings. But again, it was just this idea that stacking and is one of those investigations, along with membranes and some other things that I'm working on at the present time. So in that case, whereas I don't feel, I greatly appreciate and admire the Japanese aesthetic. To me, it goes deeper than that. It goes into the technique, because I find there's like certain things, and I love this when I looked at, Japanese architecture, especially the wood architecture, was the way in which they had joineries that were completely innovative, based on the way in which we had joinery here in the West. And I kind of still remember the fact that, Wright was kind of so, Wright's desire to understand the Katsura Villa and the kind of classic shoji screen manipulation of space was something that led very much to his recognition of what would become the kind of like open modern floor plan that we see in the 20th century and the end of the 19th century. So these innovations, these ideas of were never really, I don't think that the 20th century Western architecture really manifests the kind of motion that existed in the kind of Japanese villa of this kind of floating roof under which these kind of like, these screens were able to kind of be moved and manipulated. It did kind of like open up the very static, kind of very kind of like heavy, kind of like 19th century architecture that existed prior. Anyway, so with that said, which kind of relates to the topic in terms of like imitators. So in the case where something exists, there's a kind of pejorative sense of how we would view imitators in, the kind of artificial kind of cultural world, which is very different than the way we would kind of see that in the natural world. So anyway, start us off, my loved one.
Okay. Here's something that's going to wow everyone that you may be unaware of. The Popish plot. This is a great one.
Peter would love this.
Oh, yeah.
I just like Popish plot. He's like, oh, wait a minute. If he's listening, like, hold on.
Well, if you're listening, Peter, this is for you. Here's
happy Easter, everyone, and happy Passover Easter for the people
for those who celebrate that.
Exactly. Yes, we have Happy Teas Tea Day.
Yes, we do. Then I'm going to paint all my eggs, and we're going to go on a giant Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
I don't. That's why I have an Easter bunny to do it for me.
Exactly.
Anyway.
You have a tough union.
Am I ready?
I give up. Are you ready?
Well, yeah.
Okay, go, Pete. Go.
Okay. Where humans are concerned, the imitation of treachery, the artifice of treason and subterfuge is often far more effective at undermining and taking down a society, a dynasty, or a system than actual treachery, than genuine treason or real subterfuge. You didn't see this coming.
Yeah, I did actually, but
you couldn't have possibly.
Okay, I didn't.
Don't be ridiculous.
You're legless.
You're legless. Anyway, it turns out that ersatz plots and imitation schemings are incredibly effective at eliciting human fear, human paranoia, and human persecution, much more so than the real thing, and they take a lot less work. And think about how most humans love a shortcut, and they love to get a grand response with the minimal amount of effort. And here is where imitation comes in. This shook dynasties for generations, and you may not have heard of this. And what actually led me to my recent studies of the Popish plot, and this is a great one, was Queen Catherine tea. Yes, Queen Catherine tea. In that cup of tea lies the entire history that swirls around the Popish plot. And here's a tale that I will weave that will have everybody hopefully enthralled. It enthralled me. So, the popish plot was a fictitious conspiracy. Now, even better than a real conspiracy. And there are real conspiracies, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I think I can speak for you. We find most of them pretty. Oh, save some. Okay.
Well, you had yours over there. I thought you were okay.
I've left you a whole bunch of mine.
Oh, let me tell you. Give me a second to tell my conspiracy.
Sure.
Hmm.
Well, come on.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So,
Okay, go.
So the popish plot was a fictitious conspiracy invented by one Titus Oates, which is a great name, who was literally a scoundrel's scoundrel. He was a blackguard, a scallywag, and a highwayman.
So he's up to shenanigans.
He was up to a shenanigans. He was a conniver of the highest order.
I'm simply puckish at times.
Yeah, Bruce is puckish, which is very, very different.
Not a rogue.
No, Bruce is a midsummer night's dream. These guys are the headless horsemen in like the legend of Washington Irving's Sleepy Hollow.
I'm fun loving.
Yes. Going to continue.
Okay.
No one's going to know what the popish plot is unless I tell them. So that between 1678 and 1681, I mean, this went on 4 years, gripped the kingdoms of England and Scotland in frenzied, deadly, murderous, anti-Catholic hysteria. And when I say hysteria, everybody was roped in. This was huge. Oates and his nefarious cohorts, one of whom was the completely insane Israel Tongue, who lived from 1621 to 1680. He was a fanatically anti-Catholic clergyman who was considered insane. And he created, anyway, I'll say what the plot is first, because this is absolutely great. So Oates and his cohorts, including Tongue, alleged that there was a vast Catholic conspiracy to assassinate King Charles II. It was a huge thing. I mean, this was supposedly a giant plot coming from the Pope, coming from the Catholic Church, which it was not, to assassinate the sitting, reigning King of England and Scotland. This was not a small thing. Now, where does Queen Catherine T come in? Well, Queen Catherine of Braganza was Portuguese, and she was actually a good one. She was very sophisticated, very, very cultured, and she actually brought the art of tea drinking, which goes right back to our friends at Tea's Tea. Yes, Queen Catherine brought tea, which was seen as an incredibly rare thing, not consumed by most people, not even the wealthy people, into daily public use and consumption. She was quite fond of tea and actually lived for quite a long time, probably because she drank a lot of tea. Now, she was the wife. She was the queen. She was the very Catholic Portuguese wife of King Charles II, who was not a Catholic. So these totally false, elaborate imitation plots and ersatz contrivances led to what is now known as a show trial. This is where it started. And executions of at least 22 completely innocent men.
Wow.
Because there was no assassination plot. And the arrest of 100 Catholic Jesuits, who also had nothing to do with it because there was no plot. It was invented by Titus Oates and Israel Tongue, which actually led to the exclusion bill clauses and changed written history, changed legal history. I mean, there was an intricate web of accusations and public fears and paranoia that went on for years. And Tong himself was widely described as turgid and incoherent, paranoid, and insane. So, imitation can be elaborate and complex, but it can be a doppelganger for the truth
Mhm.
and is often far more effective at undermining truth than actual truth.
Mm. No, I agree.
Okay,
I
I had to
mean, one of the
explain it.
things
It
I
was a
wanted to say
complicated
was,
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
I've always felt that one of the reasons there are not more conspiracies
Hmm.
is because conspiracies require two things that are in short supply in human nature.
Hmm.
One is intelligence, and the other, which is even more rare, is loyalty.
Hmm.
Without loyalty and intelligence, conspiracies cannot be pulled off because you're going to have, it's either going to be a poor plan, it'll be discovered, or you'll have somebody who kind of gets upset and then basically just gives up the ghost. So unless you have an abundance of these two things, it's unlikely you're ever going to be able to get even something off the ground.
Well, that went off the ground.
No,
I
no,
mean,
I know,
that
I know.
really went
Sometimes
off
what
the
happens is
ground.
we play these things on ourselves. Is
Yeah.
that I think that sometimes the ones that kind of like get created, let's just say this is a conspiracy in that has a natural origin
Mhm.
as opposed to one that's actually artificially constructed, because this was one that basically kind of manifests itself because of a lack of involvement of people.
It was pure theater, though. And
Exactly, but I mean, it was like
written, it was
it
forged,
was
there was.
something that just kind of like kind of grew its own. It grew its own life of its own, and basically separated itself from the people who created it.
Mhm.
The conspiracies that we all see today, like the space lasers and control of this and control of that,
Yeah, it's
that
absurd.
those are the things that rely on those two things that, like I said, they're in short supply: intelligence and loyalty.
Hmm.
But with that said,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to overstate.
what are those things that are essential in our nature? And I think one of the things that talking about the correlations that Darwin talked about is the fact that as things in nature kind of are adapted into the artificial circumstance, there are these correlations. So what happens is these things become monstrosities and they become things that manifest themselves. So
Yeah,
in the
this
type,
correlates
yeah,
to lots of
in the
things
type
in the
when we
natural
see
world.
people who are in our society
Mhm.
are imitators, they resemble the imitations that happen in the natural world, but at the same time, it has become to a degree some kind of sense of kind of like misunderstood correlations and
Mhm.
potential monstrosities. So, with that said, I mean, give us
Yes, I'll point out one of the most
away.
absurd things when you have an imitation document that is so absurd that it is only taken as the truth by its placement. And this document was actually placed in more pockets. It was placed in transoms. It was actually placed in wainscoting, and then it was found by the same people that had hidden it there.
Mm.
It's just hilarious now. If it didn't mean that a lot of innocent people were killed, this imitation embroiled a physician, a very innocent guy named Sir Richard Barker, a chemist named Christopher Kirby, who was fooled into finding this imitation of a document. What was the document? The assassination order for King Charles II. Well, there was no assassination order by the Catholic Church, but this was a document that actually named 100 fake Jesuit conspirators who were all arrested. So, I mean, it was put in pockets and found there. It was quite elaborate, which brings us to your point. I'm going to literally jump into things in nature But why don't
Right.
you?
Well, that's what I was saying.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
start with that, and I'll kind of
sure.
like work
Yeah,
off that.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So,
Say, P.
okay,
Say.
well, there are many animals that imitate plants for survival, for reproduction, for pollination.
Mhm.
They are the consummate imitators, but there are also plants that imitate animals. Really, really interesting. I'll give a few key examples. One of my favorites is the orchid mantis. Now, for those of you who've never called up a photograph, just Google orchid mantis. It is one of the most bizarre, beautiful. It's pink and peach colored and golden and white and looks like an orchid. And the entire point of Hymenopus coronatus, the orchid mantis, it's gorgeous and deadly and a brilliant imitator who mimics or imitates the orchid flower in order to ambush prey, such as bees and the butterflies, who will literally land on it in order to feed on it or pollinate, but they can't because it's not a flower. And it has legs like petals, pink and white hues to lure the pollinators, who are very much driven by scent and color. And as soon as the pollinators land, it impales them with
impaling.
spiked forelegs. So it's beautiful and incredibly fatal. Now, this is called aggressive mimicry, and that's a great term, meaning when an animal imitates a plant to entice unsuspecting prey closer. So that is one.
So there's a kind of pragmatic effect that you see here.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things I've kind of like, we probably talk about this in the future. As of now, I think we have, this is episode 81, 71, but I've actually written titles up to 87. So one of the things that we should talk about at one point is the concept of like what I call natural morality. I believe all morality descends from natural circumstance, and that even our sense that we have in terms of like the philosophical or religious morality is basically descendant of these things. And I think that the correlates are such that what, you know, when we think of like what is it to be good, what is it to be correct, to be right, all these things come to the idea of natural efficiency, of how to be able to continue to reproduce and to subsist. So survival basically is the moral imperative. And in case that we might look upon these kind of social manifestations, they all basically descend from this imperative, which is conduct yourself and your group in order to be able to maintain your survival. But anyway, what happens is when we think of the imitator, and we've talked about the idea of the copyist and the specialist,
and the plagiarist,
right? We talk about the advantage, right, used in the case of the imitator or the plagiarist to be able to kind of take information and use it to their advantage. Now, it's frowned upon in the fact that you were not the generator of this information. You simply absconded with it. And it's kind of like something that's kind of seen in our society as somewhat lowly, but it has a self-preservation kind of capacity in the fact that it may extend a career. It may actually justify a promotion. It may do things to kind of help you sustain yourself within that idea of persisting. So in a way, it's not unlike the way in which it exists in nature. However, some of the correlates, because of the fact that we're trying to kind of see this, and they're these kind of like anomalies in relationship to things within kind of like moral structures. So that's the kind of thing, is that like we see people who will take work, plagiarize work. One of the things that's really sad is when I see young scholars or young academics who basically will, take work that belongs to students or other,
entire
colleagues,
papers, word for word,
and use it as a way to promote themselves. I always felt that was kind of somewhat, it was just really pathetic.
It's low.
It is. And I mean, I always think that and again, this is an artificial rarefied circumstance. As an academic, as a person of the mind, as a speculist, the greatest satisfaction one can gain is that idea of being able to kind of work on the issues that concern you and the ideas that exist and be able to formulate and conformulate concise and rigorous and consequential things.
Mhm.
So to kind of basically to kind of give that away, to kind of walk past that, to me is a kind of like
It's a sacrifice of
it
what
is.
should be
It's
a fascinating
yeah,
process,
exactly. I mean,
right?
the thing that I live for is to
Yeah.
have those moments of speculation and those moments of revelation to basically say, oh, what's this we
And
have
it's so
here?
sad that they don't ever experience that.
No, exactly, and
They don't see the value
but
in
in
that.
fact,
Yeah.
the significance
Mhm.
and the privilege that's
Mhm.
bestowed upon people of this type is because of the fact that it's assumed that they are able to engage in this act of consequence, which
Yeah.
in fact they cannot.
Yep.
And I think it was in previous times it was easier to spot it.
Mhm.
But in the world of AI and in the world of kind of like Chat GPT or whatever these things are, it seems as if
Yeah.
no one is actually trying to formulate. People are just kind of, typing in parameters and letting their fingers do the walking.
But
Which, dated myself. That's a Yellow
I
Pages.
love that.
There used
Let
to
your
be thing
fingers do
called
the walking.
yeah,
It's a snap.
yeah, exactly. But I mean,
Yeah.
again, nobody knows what a phone book is. No one's ever seen
Well,
one
we
unless they
do.
go, yeah, which, basically phone books were things you used to stand on to reach high places
Yeah.
because they were very thick. But actually, it
Mhm.
was in fact a book filled of phone numbers.
I used to love going through the phone
Yeah.
book.
I remember actually the first time my name was in the Manhattan phone book, it was in the header of the page.
Oh, that's so great.
So it was actually Gemmel. Bruce Gemmel was actually
the header.
was like, yeah. So it was Bruce Gemmel to whatever the other one was. I'm like, that was status. I mean,
That's
that was like,
great.
man, I was like, like,
actually
this is my
meant
first year
something,
here, and
yeah.
I was like, I'm not only on the page,
You were
I'm
the
at I was
pennant.
exactly.
Yeah, that's
What was I?
nice. You were the pennant on the
Oh, because I
castle.
never knew I was a pennant.
See? You're a pennant.
Yeah, I still am.
You are.
Anyway, so yeah.
So here are some really fascinating examples. One of the things that we love to do here at Art Science Complex is talk about materials science. Now, materials, these are the sections, these are the research articles in the journal Science. That we often find, I can speak for us, I think, most fascinating. The work that's being done in plant science, mycology, neuroscience, and material science is some of the best, most compelling work. So,
love plant science.
Same. So here is something really, really fascinating. When an animal is not imitating a plant, when an animal imitates an inedible object. Now, these are fascinating, and it happens a lot. So it is a living, breathing animal with a circulatory system, a respiratory system, a lymphatic system, imitating something that is often not alive, often an inanimate object, another material altogether to reproduce, but most often to fool its predators. A few really great examples are leaf insects, which do resemble green or withered or dead leaves. And I've come up with a new term of dynamic imitation. And by that, I mean actual form and function, actual actions which contribute to the sphere of an imitation or masquerade being wholly, not just partially successful. And in this, if you've ever watched a leaf insect in action, they sway to mimic leaves in the wind. And they don't just sway in a random way. They observe the leaves and they imitate the effect of wind on leaves. Now, this actually takes a lot of analysis. And it's constant adaptation because different gusts of wind and different types of leaves and trees move in entirely different ways.
Just understood a very important thing.
Oh,
you know how sometimes
that's what I'm here for.
I will become invisible.
Yeah.
but you have this ability to find me.
I can
I
always
think I
find you.
realized why now. I try to stay perfectly still rather than allow myself to move
That's your mistake.
exactly, because but if
No.
when I'm trying to be invisible, instead of staying completely still, if what I do is move as per se the movement of the wind or kind of like other kind of things that are the currents that may be moving around, that will probably make my invisibility 100%.
Like say you're in front of the television and you're actually moving with the images that are going on. I couldn't see you
That's
at
true,
all.
right? But I mean, like if I'm at the Met and I'm sitting in the bench, like what I could do is if there's a, because there's an HVAC systems and air's always circulating, I could basically just tumble down and, that might work, might be more successful. Then you'll never find me.
That's great. Thanks. So walking stick insects imitate twigs and branches.
Mm-hmm.
The leaf-tailed gecko imitates dead leaves and bark. And this is a brilliant one. The Malayan horned leaf frog is the forest floor. So whatever litter is on the rainforest floor, not just leaves, stones, berries, nuts, pieces of other animals, anything that's on the forest floor, it will pose as. And that's pretty great. The Indian oak leaf butterfly in an example of what I call functional imitation. When its wings are open, it can be seen by predators. It closes its wings in imitation of a dead leaf. So it knows what it's doing. And sea anemones imitate a flower and sea vegetables and sea plants, but they are, in fact, animals.
Interesting.
Oh, do you have other things that I'm in? Yeah.
No.
You sure?
No.
I have other things.
No, I know.
But I don't want to take up too much.
Okay. Anyway, so I think in that regard, we kind of see the fact that these situations kind of come about in the fact that there is a beneficial aspect, and this beneficial aspect is basically geared towards the ability to reproduce and the ability to kind of like, to reproduce and to kind of like sustain itself. So one of the things that was interesting, you brought it up in the preview. Was the one of the kind of transvestite kind of like cuttlefish, wasn't it?
Yes, I did.
So yeah, that was an interesting one.
Oh yeah, we should talk about this again.
About that one because I think
okay. The cuttlefish, which is a mistress or master of masquerade, the alpha male cuttlefish would normally be the only ones who would be allowed anywhere near the females in order to mate and pass on their genetic material. They're much larger than the beta males or the theta males, who would never get near the cuttlefish females, never get a chance to mate, and die alone. So what the beta and theta and much, much smaller males do, they turn themselves into females temporarily in an imitation. They are not actually turning themselves into a hormonal female. They are still very, very much male. Their intention is to get close enough to mate with the female. They aren't fooling her, actually, because she knows they are males. They're fooling the alpha males.
To get past them.
To get past the alpha males in order to mate with the female. They actually change their body type, the texture, the color of their skin, the patterns, the shape, the size of their bodies to look like females, and it works every time.
It does. It's
and they go right past the alpha cuttlefish.
I remember when I could with like guys I knew, kind of like in college,
the scavenger boys.
The scavenger boys. The scavenger boys were basically, it's like, oh, I'm going to like a feminist rally this weekend. It's like, why, man? Like, you don't believe in that shit. It's like, no, I'm not going because I believe in it. But like, if you go there and you pretend like you really care,
then you come off as a sensible.
You come off as a sensible guy and like and sensitive and like women love that. And it's like, I remember we were explaining that to somebody, some some female friend of ours, and she's like, "Those bastards!" And it's
I
like,
know it was quite a
but it was kind of a
revelation.
similar thing. I guess
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of more on the left. On the right, I'm sure there are guys who, go to church because there's cute women who go to
Of
church or
course,
whatever. It's
they
like,
would not go
right,
normally.
exactly. Of
So,
course, you're not supposed to marry your sister, but
oh,
sometimes I
oh.
forget. But anyway,
Didn't
it
end
does
well for the ancient Egyptians when they did that. They
didn't
all became
didn't
hemophiliacs.
end well in Britain either,
Or Spain,
no,
either.
or West Virginia.
Yeah.
But enough
Anyway.
said. Basically, there
Mhm.
is this thing where you kind of see this intention of kind of like masquerading as something that you're not in
It
order
really
to kind of
works.
in order to receive sexual favor. Remember, there was that time we saw that guy who used to go to the yoga classes.
Oh,
would go to,
he went to every yoga class, couldn't do yoga, wasn't
had no
flexible,
interest in doing yoga.
had no interest
he was
in
just
yoga.
going
He
there
just scoped out all of the nerd girls.
right. In fact,
who
there's a-
were onto him after a while. He
yeah,
managed
but
to
it was
get a lot of dates.
no, exactly. But I
Oh,
mean, and
I have
also
two
there's
great
that
examples.
I remember that Odd Couple episode where Edward Willella,
Oh,
who was
yeah.
in fact a real
He's a
alpha male,
a real
and
alpha
like
male.
kind of like
And a ballet dancer.
he was brilliant
extraordinaire.
dancer, but had also been a boxer. But what was
Yeah.
interesting was, in the Odd Couple episode, Felix is kind of interviewing him. He says like, "So why did you go into dance?" He's like, "I wanted to meet girls."
Oh,
And it was like
great.
really funny because I mean, everyone kind of at the time there was very much this effeminate kind of like, there was like very much of there was a kind of doubt of men who danced, but he was basically there to reassert. It's like, oh yeah, this is where all the cute girls were.
Oh, I have two really
anyway,
fascinating things.
Go.
These you're all going to want to hear.
Mhm.
I have two stunning, really absurd examples of plants which imitate animals.
Mhm.
One is the bee orchid, bee is in buzz,
Mhm.
called Ophrys. This orchid lures pollinators by specifically imitating a female bee. So, fascinating and highly complex imitation sequence operation. These bee orchids attract male horned bees by emitting a pheromone like scent. Yes. And also having flowers that look like the female bees, leading the male horned bees to attempt to actually mate with the flower. That is quite something, thereby transferring the pollen. Ingenious. That is complex, stratified, ingenious imitation on a hormonal level.
Mhm,
It is
mhm.
quite something. And
Mhm.
the other example I'd like to leave you with is the corpse flower. This is a wondrous and repulsive example. This is the Amorphophallus titanium, which imitates an animal corpse. It doesn't imitate a living animal, imitates a dead animal. This bizarre and enormous plant omits a powerful odor. If you've ever smelled one, they are noxious, of rotting animal flesh, which attracts flies and carrion beetles. It's pollinators. It works. A further nuance, and this is the final thing I'll say, of ingeniously calibrated imitation of an animal corpse is this flower produces heat, which is absolutely unheard of. This corpse flower produces a heat signature, which mimics the exact temperature of a dead animal carcass.
Interesting.
Yes, it is.
So
how great is that?
No, it is, and I think
Yeah.
this is this has actually come quite to the point, was the fact that we see this
Yeah.
situation where there are these circumstances by which an individual will take up, or a species will take up, this trait, which is the imitation, and the imitation is to somehow deceive. That deception allows for success. So the success is actually something that kind of like is the goal. Now, we are, in an artificial sense, kind of not completely in tune with the natural circumstance. And as a result, sometimes these things kind of like confuse us in terms of their kind of like morality. And I think in that case, we look at the fact that the circumstance of a natural morality is the place in which these monstrosities or correlations can take place. So in that case, I mean, I think that we see the fact that this thing, which makes perfect sense and is kind of quite clear in terms of its value, and the fact that it continues to take place and identify itself and occur, is because it has an actual consequence. It actually has a value,
It's highly effective.
which is highly effective and therefore highly successful.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that we have to kind of understand. I think, we look at the kind of Machiavellian kind of aspects of kind of imitation, and, you think to yourself what you do in order to kind of create this idea of value. And value is something we'll talk about. I think we have it slated for like July, but, you can kind of exercise and execute a task, or you can create value. In The Prince, Machiavelli talks about the fact that, kind of like O.J. Simpson, if I was to kill this person, but I think in the case of Machiavelli, he basically says, in order to be of use, this is how I would particularly go about this sort of activity. And I think in that case, that sense of value is something that has to be talked about in terms of what are the consequences of that value. And that's the kind of thing that ultimately is a very, very big question. So I think what's good about it is I love the fact that we've kind of left with a complex web of kind of like questions rather than actually definitive answers. And, that to me is like what makes things successful. Is I don't really believe that things are as simple or as easy as people make them out to be. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're kind of like not succeeding, is that everyone's a genius except everyone else, and nobody knows except them. And it's like, I usually find when both people accuse the other person of like being an idiot, they're both right. And that kind of seems to take care of most of that. So anyway, any last words there, Pete?
Well, yes, I'm going to leave you with a thought on the eggplant. Didn't see that coming.
No.
The eggplant is actually a berry imitating a vegetable. It has all the properties, textures, flavors, savory characteristics, reproductive strategies of a vegetable, but it's a berry.
Interesting. All right. So next week, I think next week we're kind of talking about a related topic, which is good. And I kind of like the fact that we're kind of, let's see. So now let's see. 72 is, intellect and execution. We're going to again talk about the specialist. And
nice.
So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to benefit all for us to keep it just that way.
T.
T's T.
Yeah.